C Wells coming at you with another video today. Y'all make sure y'all lock in with us. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and become a part of the SWAC Talk family by becoming a member. 99 cents gets you a membership to the YouTube channel. We have special perks coming at you. We're going to be dropping special members only videos and shorts. I'm going to have rants and reactions to different things that I want to put there. So if you want to get everything, man, become a member of the Swag Talk crew for 99 cents and get down with the get down, man. And so we're going to still be bringing y'all a lot of stuff, swag, smoke, and everything like that, and all our normal videos. But we also bring y'all that membership tier. So get down with that. Check out the Facebook and Instagram, both Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76. And now let's get on with the show, man. Let's do it.
Wednesday, Sundays, catch the ride. Football hoops, we breaking wide. Stats and facts, truth on high. SWAT talk where the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Just pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel. Hit the corner of the field, we strategize. Breaking the game down, no disguise. Play by play, we analyze. I wear sharp, we magnify. SWAT talk where the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Just pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel. Wednesdays, heat, Sundays, ignite. We talking legends shining bright. Back and forth, day or night. This the plug, we bring the light. SWAT talk where the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Cats pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel. Wednesdays, heat, Sundays, ignite. We talking legends shining bright. Back and forth, day or night. This the plug, we bring the light. SWAT talk when the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Cats pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of Swag Talk. Show we cover the swag inside and out. I am your tour guide around the swag. C Wells coming at you. And we are continuing our 2025 season previews. Today, we're talking Grambling State football. We're going to talk about what to expect from the Tigers, what my thoughts are for this team going into the 2025 season. So without any further ado, man, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. But actually, we do have some further ado. Swag Smoke and Swag Talk tees are back. I'm gonna have a link in the description, and the link will be in the pinned comment. So if you wanna, you wanna be, down with the Swag Talk fam, man, cop you a Swag Talk tee or Swag Smoke tee before the start of the season, and represent for the fam. So with that being said, man, let's get down with Grambling State. Tigers coming off of a 5-7 conference and 5-7 overall season, 2-6 in conference. That record is a little deceiving because this is a team that lost a few one possession games. Some of those games went the other way. Maybe they have a better record. They were an enigma. Honestly, if you want to put it that way, they were an enigmatic team. They scored 24 points a game, which would rank them number 3 in the conference, scoring 24 points a game. Like I said in a previous episode, you only had 2 teams in the conference average over 30 points. Actually, you only had 2 teams in the conference average over 25 points a game. So everybody was kind of in that range. But Grambling was at 24.7, which was 3rd. They were also 4th in scoring defense at 24.9. So not, they didn't play a lot of high scoring games, but they were always kind of able to kind of keep themselves in there in the hunt. But when you look at how they produced, they were 11th in total offense at 282 yards per game, scored 30 touchdowns, averaged 4.6 yards per play. Defensively, they gave up 377 yards per game, which was ninth in the league, 5.7 yards per play allowed, and they gave up 54 touchdowns, which were the second most in the. Excuse me, they gave up 34 touchdowns. I was about to get them somebody else's number. They gave up 34 touchdowns on the season. The rushing attack was actually not that good last season, even though they had some very capable backs. They averaged 111 yards per game on the season, had 19 touchdowns on the ground, averaged 3.3 yards per carry. Defensively, they were fourth against the run at 146 yards per game, allowing 4 yards per carry with 19 touchdowns. Their passing attack was ninth at 170 yards per game. They scored 11 touchdowns and had 12 interceptions. 2,047 yards, completed 55% of their passes. Defensively, statistically, they were not a good pass defense. They allowed over 200 yards per game, they allowed 230 yards per game, which was worse in the league. They gave up 15 touchdowns, but they had 15 interceptions, which was tied for the second most in the conference. So they did a good job with turnovers. This was kind of a feast or famine type of team. Like I said, they forced 15 interceptions and they recovered 13 fumbles. So they had 28 takeaways. Um, they had 12 interceptions. They had 12 fumbles lost during the season and 12 interceptions. So they were a +4, but they did turn the ball over a lot. 24 giveaways, 28 takeaways. Um, if they were able to turn you over, a lot of times they would end up with short fields, and that could give you, an opportunity to put some points on the board, or it could lead directly to 2 points. So they were one of those kind of teams that you honestly you just never really knew what you were going to get from them. Sometimes they played well, and other times, the offense, especially, kind of disappeared on them at times. But they all, the fact that they could force those turnovers is something that kept them in a lot of games. Ultimately, sometimes it would help, and sometimes it wouldn't. When you look at what they did, they gave up 26 sacks on the season, which was sixth in the league. Defensively, they registered 25, which was fifth in the league. So they did a pretty decent job with generating pressure. And they were not that bad protecting the quarterback, even though they gave up some hits to quarterbacks. They did a decent job protecting the quarterbacks. Their offensive line was really young the last couple of years, so they still kind of developing and growing together. When you look at them on third down, that's what killed them. They were not an efficient team by any stretch of the imagination, only converting 28% on third down, which was last in the league. When you can't do that, when you can't convert third downs, you're not gonna be able to drive the ball down the field. Obviously, you're gonna, you're gonna be a team that needs the big play, that needs the turnover, that needs the short field to score. So offensively, they just were not an efficient offense. When you look at what they did on fourth down, they were ninth at 41%. Defensively, they were fourth in third down conversion rate at 34%. So not bad. They did a pretty good job of getting off the field as a defense. They just, it was just one of them things. If they gave up a play, it was probably going to be a big play because they just really, if they didn't get the turnover, it would probably be a big play. They did lead the league in fourth down defense at 30%. So, like I said, the defense did a pretty good job with keeping the team in games. Offensively, they just never really got going, and there was a multitude of reasons that could be pointed to, and some of those reasons led to the departure of Eric Dooley as offensive coordinator. Coach Mickey Joseph said he's gonna kind of take the reins as the main play caller, although he did say all the other offensive coaches will have input, but his voice will be the final voice. Um, that's heard. Although there will be instances where other guys can kind of take that reign, but he's kind of circling the wagons after last season. And that's something that could be good. It could not be, but it's worth taking a look at. They were sixth in red zone offense, scoring 31 or 36, scoring 86% of the time. 23 touchdowns in the red zone, 16 rushing, 7 passing, 8 of 9 on field goals, and they turned the ball over 3 times in the red zone, 1 interception, 1 fumble, and 1 turnover on downs. Third red zone defense, they were third, 30 of 37 for 81%. They gave up 19 touchdowns, which is the second fewest in the league. So defense was pretty stout in the red zone. 12 rushing touchdowns, 7 passing touchdowns, 11 of 14 on field goals. And ironically, for a defense that had a ton of takeaways, they only had um, a fumble recovery in the red zone. They did have a turnover on downs, but for a defense that did a lot of taking the ball away, they didn't have many takeaways in the red zone. But a lot of time they stopped teams before they got there. Opponents had 37 red zone attempts, which um, was one of the fewest in the conference. There were 37 red zone attempts. Were the were the I guess you could say the fourth fewest. So they didn't really give up a lot of opportunities to even get in the red zone, and they gave up the second fewest scores in the red zone. So this was a really good defense in that aspect. A lot of time they just couldn't really help themselves. Another thing that killed them, penalties. They had 111 penalties on the season, which was last in the league. So they were highly penalized. 1,057 yards, which also was the worst in the league, and 88 yards per game, which was so. Turnovers on your end of the field, on your side of the ball, I guess you could say, um, penalties, and being unable to convert and sustain drives. All those things are going to combine and kill you, and put a lot of pressure on your defense to get those takeaways. And that's something that if you look at the way the season kind of went, um, if they like I said, if they couldn't take the ball away from you, they were gonna have some problems. Um, just kind of looking at games where they they did have a couple games where they still had you know some takeaways, but they just didn't go their way. They had 2 takeaways against Alabama A&M. They had 2 fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, but they still lost that game in the second half. They had an interception against Southern. They offensively they just could not do anything in that game. Bethune-Cookman, they had a fumble. They had a forced fumble, but they did not have a takeaway in that game. Pine Bluff, they had an interception in that game. So they were able to kind of make some things happen here and there, but for the most part, um, it just didn't always go their way on that end of things. And this was a team, like I said, when you look at what they did, offensively, they lost. They didn't lose a lot of guys. This is a team returning a lot of players, but they lost production. But a few guys that did lose, they lost their leading rusher, and Contrevion Hargrove, who finished with 432 yards, but they returned Trey Bradford, who I didn't realize was coming back. He had 403 yards on the season and 5 touchdowns. So he actually was probably the guy who had the more explosive runs for them. This offense did not have a lot of explosiveness. Their longest run on the season was 41 yards by Hargrove. They really just they didn't even have a rusher go over 500 yards. They just were just that kind of offense that kind of just was making their way through it. They lose their top 2 quarterbacks. Although Miles Crawley didn't necessarily have a season that he would want to have. Um, he still led the team in passing. Ashton Fry is the leading returning guy. He was 4 of 7 on the season for 9 yards, so not a lot of action there. But you bring in and I do have some questions because looking at the roster, I did not see Ty Keys on there. I don't know if he's gone or if he just wasn't on the roster yet. But that's a guy who I really have some high expectations of being able to compete for that quarterback spot. Xavier T-Set from Southern, another guy who I really think can take this job. I thought that was a guy that when you look at what he did at Southern last season, um, he was the number two guy, regardless of what. He probably should have been the number one guy, but he was the number two guy. Got injured, once he came back, had a really good game against Alabama A&M, won SWAC player of the week. Um, you know, had a rough first half against Bethune-Cookman and didn't see the field again until the SWAC championship game when he wasn't even expected to play. And I thought he had some up and down moments in that game. I thought he showed some flashes of what he can do, but he also, showed a few of those young guy mistakes. But last season, he finished with 39 carries, 122 yards, one touchdown, 71 of 129, 941 yards, had six touchdowns, three interceptions. Guy can throw the ball down the field. He's a lefty, so that's always a little odd to look at, but he is a guy who can be mobile, and Grambling wants to run the ball more this season, so he can help you there. Like I said, I'm not quite sure, what the status of Ty Keys. I'm assuming he's still there. Maybe he's just not on the roster. But last season at EMCC, 161 of 283, 2,026 yards, 19 touchdowns, five interceptions, ran the ball 56 times for 293 yards and four touchdowns. Um, this is a nice quarterback race, and I really think out of the two newcomers, I will really say one of the two newcomers would be your guy, but you never count out a guy that's been there already, that's been in the program. I mean, obviously new, kind of a new system to a degree, but the play caller is the head coach, so you're familiar. So I think quarterback could be a real strength for this team. The offensive line is definitely gonna be a positive. They return more than eight guys that saw action this past season, led by Taj Martin and Quentin Ross. This is an offensive line, that's been growing. They've been, kind of coming together. They had their ups and downs last season. Wasn't like I said, wasn't necessarily their fault per se that a lot of things fell on the offense, but they're the front. They're the front of the offense. So if they go, then everybody else is gonna go. And this is, they want to run the ball. And so it's going to be up to these guys to open up the holes for those backs because, like I said, there's lot of guys who have not saw time on the field at Grambling in that running back room besides Bradford and Tony Phillips, who got some action last season. Um, I had saw that Dedrick Talbert was back, but again, looking at the roster, I don't see him. So if he's still there, then he's definitely another guy that can contribute to the run game because he did have some flashes last season. I'm just gonna throw his numbers out there just in case. Dietrich Talbert, 54 carries, 208 yards, had four touchdowns, average 3.9 yards per carry, had along with 31 on the season. Like I said, explosiveness just wasn't really there for this team. Um, the longest pass was 71, and they also had a 67 yarder and then a 53 yarder. Um, just not a lot of big plays for this offense. Um, and so I think that's going to be the key to this team is can they hit those explosive plays? I mean, you do have some talent. Like I said, the receiver room didn't necessarily wasn't actually able to shine. Um, so you had Javon Robinson who led the team with 43 catches, but then Kavadis Knighton had 19 catches. I think he's back at the tight end spot. After that, Nick Howard is like your next returning guy. He had 13 catches. Also, Bradford had 13 catches. So you just don't really have a lot of production, but there is talent. A guy like Tylon Williams, a very speedy guy, really could be a real big factor in the return game. Guys like that, and also some of the newer guys that they brought in to kind of help fill that void. I mean, it's gonna. I think you're gonna have to be able to spread the ball around more this season. Obviously, since you don't have that one guy that you were feeding the ball to, everybody else is gonna have to eat. So there's gonna be, there's gonna be a big opportunity for guys to step up and take the reins and make some things happen. So there are weapons on this offense, and I think if this team is gonna improve on that 2-6 conference record, then the offense has to be more consistent. They have to be able to drive the ball down the field. They have to avoid the turnovers. They're gonna have to be able to convert those third downs. Obviously you want to keep yourself out of third and longs and things like that. Especially if you're going to be a team that wants to run the ball more, you want to put yourself in shorter positions. You want to make things easier for your quarterback, whoever that may be. I mean, whoever it is going to be a guy that doesn't have a lot of, SWAC starts. I mean, basically, I think basically you only have like 3 starts in FCS football between these guys. So there's not a lot of in-game experience on the FCS level. I mean, Keys is a very explosive guy, but he hasn't really played that much outside of JUCO, which obviously he was very good there. So you gotta assume that is gonna translate. Same thing with T said. He had 10 games under his belt. And a couple of those games he didn't even play that much because he was coming off of an injury or he was coming in late in mop-up duty. So he doesn't really have a lot of in-game reps, but when he was able to shine, he was able to shine. So if they can put these quarterbacks in positive position, then I think they'll be in a good spot. And it's also important for the defense to not have to get all those takeaways. I mean, if you got a defense that can take the ball away and score, then I think you can't beat that. I mean that makes things a lot easier if you don't have to worry about starting on your 30-yard line. Maybe you start on the 45 of your opponents or the 50, and then you don't have as far to go to score. So you don't want to have to depend on that. That could because turnovers, especially fumbles, are really luck based. Who knows how that ball is going to bounce and roll. The football takes crazy bounces, so you want to be able to keep your offense moving without having to rely on that. And I thought the defense was actually, they actually pretty solid. Like I said, they had some it's ironic with a defense that could take the ball away as much as they could, especially with interceptions, that they did struggle in pass coverage at times. Losing a guy like Andrew Jones, who had 122 tackles, he was a guy who could be, pretty much all over the field. He had 20 tackles for loss, so he was a down he was a downhill guy at times. I mean, he could get in the backfield, obviously, with 20 tackles for loss. I mean, not necessarily the biggest guy, not gonna get in there and just knock heads and stuff and stuff everything up. But when you lose a guy like that cleans up so much, it's gonna be up to everybody else to kind of step into that. Um, and that's gonna be that's gonna be one of those things. Guys like Brendan Barley, who finished with 39 tackles on the season. He had 5 tackles for loss and a sack. Also had 3 interceptions, and 2 pass breakups. Uh, Oh, Josh Darling is another guy who maybe able to step up in one of those spots. He had 12 tackles last season, but could have a bigger role this season. Your secondary, Blake Davis is an all-conference preseason guy. Had 41 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Did have 3 interceptions to tie for the team lead. Like I said, there are guys back there that can make some plays. I like Bryce Cage on the defensive line. Had 11 tackles for loss, 4 sacks last season. Had 5 quarterback hurries and a forced fumble. Finished with 49 tackles. Also, Jonathan Horton is another guy opposite him on that defensive line. That had 25 tackles this past season and 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Big guy. Was a basketball player. Nice size, nice mobility. Got that little dog streak in him. You know what I'm saying? He's not scared to knock heads. He's not scared to get in nobody's face. That's a guy that can really energize a group and work opposite of a guy like Bryce Cage. That's a Scotlandville connection, Baton Rouge, stand up. Um, I'm always gonna support those guys. But I like this defense. I like this defense, and I think if they can, if they can play the pass better and not be so boom or bust, I think that's going to help them a lot. I mean, offensively, I think is where things are going to have to kind of improve. They're going to have to be more explosive. They're going to have to take care of the football. They're going to have a lot of defense to rest by maintaining drives, and so it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Joseph handles that offense, and that's going to be the key to this season. The schedule is not ridiculously hard. I mean, you do have that Ohio State game, which, I mean, that's just a great opportunity just to be, to be in a stadium like the Horseshoe and see where you stand. But you got two winnable games around that. You got Langston to open up the season at Shreveport and Kentucky State to open up your home schedule. So you could come out of the Ohio State game as long as you don't get super banged up. You can come out of that 3 game stretch at 2-1 and be in good shape heading into that East Texas A&M game, which is a winnable game. It's a home. I mean, you beat those guys in overtime, but they had some success on offense against you, but you were able to still turn them over. So you can actually come out of this preseason non-conference slate, however you want to put it, at 3-1, heading into the State Fair Classic. I think that's honestly probably as good as it gets, unless you can pull off a monumental upset. 3-1 with an FCS win and two D2 wins. I think that's great. I think that puts you in good position going into conference play. Um, you open up conference play with Prairie View. That's gonna be a battle. Um, we don't really know where the Panthers are. I mean, like I said, as days go on, we kind of figure out a little bit more about them, but you're not really gonna know anything about them till you see them in action on the field. These teams played to a 5 overtime matchup last season. The momentum was swinging back and forth. Prairie View made the last couple plays to win. So the at least between last season, the gap wasn't that big. Prairie View obviously brought in a lot of guys. They brought in the top class in FCS. So did they open the gap? We'll find out. They have had a lot of success recently in this series. So Grambling has to kind of get themselves right, and coming in this game 3-1, um, it gives you opportunity to have some momentum and have some confidence. If you can find a way to win this game, then you head into the Texas Southern game at home on a basically, on a with a 4-1 record, and a couple games in a row winning streak. Um, you're in good position sitting in the division. If you can win those first two conference games, you're in pretty good shape. And then you throw in Pine Bluff, you got a chance if things go your way to open up conference play at 3-1 and actually be 6-1 heading to Las Vegas. So there is an opportunity for Grambling in this early schedule to really be in some good shape before they head into that Jackson State game. Obviously, the Prairie View game is going to be tough. Texas Southern is going to be tough. Pine Bluff is on the road, but you've had success against these guys, although they played you to like 10 points last year, I think it was. But you still have opportunity. They have a lot of turnover, so you should be favored in that game. That's a game I definitely consider Grambling to be a favorite in. Um, Texas Southern, I marked it as a toss up, but it's at Grambling, so I probably get them a slight edge, especially depending on what goes on in the State Fair Classic. Um, like I said, you play Jackson State, Las Vegas. Last season, you were able to do what nobody else could do, and that was to make Jackson State make a ton of mistakes, and you were able to score points off those mistakes directly. Pick six, scoop and score. That's 14 points. I mean, you still won the game. You still would have probably won the game in a closer fashion, but you were able to make those plays and probably play one of the better games that you played all season. So you gotta anticipate these guys coming, with a little bit extra fire. But you've shown that you can make these guys make mistakes. If you can repeat that, then I think you got a decent shot there. But right now, I don't really think you're gonna be in a position to force a ton of turnovers in that game. But you never say never. Then you come back home against Alabama A&M. Bulldogs have had, this has been a series kind of back and forth a little bit. A&M's had some success against you. New coach here. So, I marked this as a toss up, but I lean toward Grambling because it's at home. You were up, you were up like 17-3 in Huntsville before things kind of fell off. Um, so I think you have a good opportunity there. Um, you get Bethune Cookman at home, which you dropped a close one of those guys, but again, you got a chance to get something going there. And then you got a tough couple of games to close out the season. You got at Alcorn and then Southern in the Bayou Classic. Obviously the bye week is sandwiched in between those two games, but that's a tough closeout, especially in division play. At Alcorn is going to definitely be tough, and Southern's always, Southern Grambling always going to be tough. Um, and you never want to count Grambling out, regardless of what their record is against Southern, because I don't really think the gap is that big between the two teams. Southern's been able to find ways to win this matchup, but you never count out a Grambling team. Obviously this season, Coach Joseph said they bringing their eight. I don't really like to say it that way because it makes it sound like your guys didn't bring their A game all season last season, but he's saying that everybody feel like Grambling at their Super Bowl, so they bringing the Super Bowl to them, which I feel like you should do that anyway. But I think that this is a team that the early season schedule minus Ohio State is very manageable. Um, your conference games, three of your conference games are neutral site games. Basically, your probably three or four toughest games in conference are neutral site games. So it's neither home or on the road. So that gives you a puncher's chance in all those games. And then you only really have one tough road game in conference, and that's Alcorn. The home slate is manageable. Texas Southern, Alabama A&M, Bethune-Cookman. This is a schedule that if you can find a way to maybe get your offense to average like 27, 28 points a game, defense might shave a couple points off of their score, and they can shave off a good chunk of that passing yardage allowed. This team could really be a factor in the West Division. I put them at I put their win total at 6.5. I do think they can. I do think they can get 7 wins. I mean, if you just kind of look at it, you got basically, I'm giving you three to open up with East Texas A&M, which I still think you're going to win that game. Kentucky State and Langston. I have you at 4-4 in conference, so that's 7 games right there. So there is a chance, and 4-4 in conference is a little conservative, but I do think this is a team that if some things can go their way, if the play calling can go the way Coach Joseph wants it, and the defense can be more consistent on a down-to-down basis, and the offense can also be more consistent. I think this is a team that could be a dark horse in the division. I don't think that anybody is like a super heavy favorite against these guys. I think they will be underdogs in some games, but then some games they're gonna be favorites. But I don't think the games that they're gonna be underdogs in are gonna be like huge margins. So I think with a team that played so many close games last season, they didn't win them, but they know that they can compete in them this season. That might go the other way. So there is, like I said, an opportunity for Grambling to win 8 games. I mean, it's not impossible. You don't play Bama State, you don't play FAMU, so that helps a little bit. Um, and so there is a chance. There like they said on Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance. There's a chance. But right now I'm gonna I'm gonna give them. I'm gonna give them 7-5 and 4-4 in conference. I think they're gonna find a way to get to them 7 wins, and they're gonna beat somebody that in the division, especially that you probably wouldn't favor them to beat. I think they're gonna pull up an upset somewhere, and I think they're gonna be in good shape. So with that being said, man, I thank y'all for tuning in. This show was an adventure to put through, man. My phone wasn't working. I had to hurry up and get this out, but it's here. We'll be back on Sunday with our Jackson State preview. Um, Southern Fan Day is on Saturday, so probably have a little something there. Scrimmage Saturday night, so I don't know if I'm gonna do a show, but probably have some thoughts somewhere. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC Seawell. signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.